Hi, I'm Doug Couchman of DougCouchman.com, and today I'm going to be talking about preparation for the GMAT.
Doug, can you give me an overview of the GMAT?
Sure, an overview of the GMAT. The GMAT, first of all, is a computerized test. It's taken at dedicated testing centers. There are 4 sections on the test. The first that you'll take is a writing sample. You are going to plan and then type out an essay about a topic that you are given on the test, and you have 30 minutes to do that. The second section is what's called integrated reasoning. This is a section that's fairly new to the GMAT the past couple of years, and it's designed to test your ability to take in and synthesize information from a variety of sources. This is a multiple choice test, as are the upcoming sections. That's a 30-minute section. The third section you'll take is math. They call it quantitative. It's data sufficiency and problem solving using junior high and high school level math. Again, multiple choice test, 75 minutes for that section. And finally, you have another 75-minute section on verbal. It includes sentence correction, reading comprehension, and critical reasoning questions. Again, multiple choice, 75 minutes. And that's the GMAT.
Can you tell me a little more about the integrated reasoning section?
The integrated reasoning section is maybe the most interesting part of the GMAT because it is the newest. And as I said, it's designed to test your ability to take in and synthesize information from a variety of sources. Basically, that means charts and graphs and tables and the like. That's the theory. But it's really important to understand one thing about the integrated reasoning section. It's still part of the GMAT. And the GMAT has its own little twists and tricks and its own way of answering questions. So while you may think, and you're probably right, that you do fine at reading graphs and tables and taking in and synthesizing the information from that, you still, in order to really nail that section, have to understand how the GMAT is asking the question so that you're sure you're answering the question that they think they're asking.
In school, I focused mainly on math and science. How can I best prepare for the verbal section of the GMAT?
The verbal section of the GMAT, a lot of people applying to business school, of course, are in that same position where they have studied perhaps math or engineering or economics, and so that's their strength. And the GMAT is scored with a composite score, so your score is going to be composed in part of that math section. Hey, that's great. And in part of the verbal section. So you really need to focus on both. How to do it is, again, going to depend on your understanding of the GMAT particularly. I'll give you an example. Sentence correction basically is English language grammar. Well, just say the word grammar, and that scares a lot of people. But here's the thing. It's not a test of all English language grammar. It's a test of GMAT grammar. And it turns out that there are really just 6 rules that you need to know with some sub-rules. And you need to understand those 6 things and how the GMAT asks the questions about them in order to nail that section.
On my practice materials, there were questions about data sufficiency. I didn't entirely get that section. How can I best prepare for that?
The data sufficiency part of the quantitative section is maybe the most intimidating part of the GMAT for many students. It seems to be asking multiple questions at once, and it can be hard to keep straight what you're trying to do. Here's what you need to do to get those data sufficiency questions nailed. First, you do need to know the underlying math, and it's important to remember that the math on the GMAT is junior high and high school level, which may have been a while back for you, but you have to be solid on it. Solid on basic arithmetic and algebra, some number theory stuff, but not too deep, basic geometry, some statistics. There's no calculus or anything beyond that. But the second thing about data sufficiency problems is, as I said, it seems like they're asking multiple questions at once. So you need a method for walking through it so that you don't confuse yourself and can apply the techniques or apply the knowledge that you have about math to the particular question they're asking. The good thing about data sufficiency is it's a great spot in which to gain a competitive advantage. If you understand how to go through a data sufficiency problem, frankly, you've got a big advantage over a lot of students who don't, who haven't studied it, and who are going to get confused.
I'm applying to business school next year. Should I take the GMAT or the GRE or both?
GMAT, GRE, or both is a great question. Once upon a time, the answer would have been GMAT because it was the only one. But now, many business schools accept either the GMAT or the GRE. And the standard answer to your question that I'm hearing from the big test prep companies is practice them both and take the one that you're most comfortable with and you do best on. And I don't believe that's right. And here's why. First of all, if you're thinking about two different tests, then you're not going to be able to devote 100% of your attention to either one of them. So it's best to choose one. Second, these tests are pretty darn similar. So very few people are going to have wildly different scores on the GMAT or the GRE. It's going to be about the same thing. Again, pick one. So how do we pick? Here's the third thing. The GMAT, as I said, is the test that has been used traditionally by business schools around the world. Recently, they've started accepting the GRE as well, but there may be some prejudice in favor of GMAT scores. Now, admissions officers I've talked to have never confirmed that, but I think it might be true, and in any case, you have nothing to lose. So take the test that we know works, give your all to it, get ready for it, and really hit it.
Does intensive prep work for the GMAT?
Does intensive prep work? And by intensive prep, what we usually mean is compressing all of your studying into a couple or maybe a few weeks, but really devoting a lot of time and energy during those couple or few weeks to your study. Well, does it work for the GMAT? The answer is absolutely it does. And that's interesting because that's not true of every test. When I was with one of the big test prep companies, I helped design their intensive prep courses for the LSAT, which is the test for applications for law school, and the MCAT, which is for medical school. And although I think we did a pretty good job with what there was there, we didn't see the success that you would like to see. It turns out intensive prep doesn't work very well for that. On the other hand, with the GMAT, intensive preparation really is appropriate for many students. Of course, every student is an individual, but for many people, blocking out 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks and really devoting the time and energy completely to studying for the GMAT during that time has been very effective for many students.
I don't live in the U.S. How do I prepare for the GMAT?
How do you prepare for the GMAT if you're outside the United States? Well, of course, the GMAT is an international phenomenon now, as is business. The GMAT is administered all over the world. There's probably a testing center near you. But the fact of the matter is that preparing can be a little bit tricky. You probably don't have as many options as you would if you were in a major United States city. However, there are a couple of things you can do. One is very similar to what we're doing now. It's remote tutoring. You can get tutoring through FaceTime or Skype or some other method over the computer. And my experience with this, and I've been doing it for a number of years, is that it works remarkably well. We can schedule times that work with your schedule. You can ask whatever questions you want, and the results are pretty impressive. The second option is to actually get in-person tutoring. And one option would be to have the tutor come to you, regardless where you are. And I do that. I tutor regardless where you are. Of course, that's a very individual thing to work out, so we would have to discuss the details.
I'm taking the GMAT to start retooling for a second career. but I haven't taken a standardized test in years. How do I get started?
Taking the GMAT and going back to business school as part of a second career or to further a career that's been going on for some years is really common. And in fact, it's a great thing. Business schools love applications from people who have already demonstrated success in the business world. So you've got a great start, but you've also identified the big issue, which is, as you said, taking a test when you haven't done that in years is kind of a big deal. There are two things to keep in mind in order to do your best on the test if you're in this position. The first is that you really do have to know your content. The math, for example, is math that you probably studied, but that was back in high school or even junior high, which may be years or even decades back. And unfortunately, there's no way around it. You're going to have to go back and relearn, bring back, into the forefront of your consciousness everything that you knew about math back then. This is actually fairly straightforward to do, and we have ways of making it back. You're not going to have to relearn everything, but that is a necessary component of being ready for the test. The second thing is that you're going to have to get into testing mode. And the way to do that is first to understand how the GMAT particularly is answering these questions. You're not preparing to take any standardized test in the world. You're preparing to take this standardized test, and knowing, being familiar with, being comfortable with the GMAT's way of asking questions is very important, and you can do that with practice and familiarity. The second thing is to bring to bear a set of techniques for answering those questions, which again, you can learn. And the third thing is to practice. There isn't much way around this. You have to get back into testing mode by practicing standardized tests, GMAT questions on the computer. And if you do those things, you will be ready for the test on test day.
I hear the test changes as you're taking it. Is that true?
The test does, in fact, change as you're taking it. It's what's called a computer adaptive test. It adapts to how you're doing. The simple way to think of it is if you're getting questions right, it makes the questions harder. And if you're missing a few questions, then it makes the questions a little easier. Now, that does change to some extent how you approach the test. But the bottom line always is getting more questions right is good. So knowing your stuff, both the underlying material and how to attack the questions, is always the most important thing. Still, that computer adaptive nature does inform to some extent your approach to the questions, and in particular to how much time you spend on certain kinds of questions. And that's something that I do work with my students with.
Why should I choose you to be my GMAT tutor?
Why should you choose me as to be your GMAT tutor? Well, first of all, we have to recognize this is a really individual decision. And you have to think very hard about what you want from a tutor. You want a tutor whom you can work well with, who you can understand, and whom you trust to help you bring out the best in you and bring your best to the GMAT. I think you should keep three things in mind with respect to whether you should work with me. The first is experience on the GMAT. As I said, I've been tutoring the GMAT since 2001. I've helped students get into some of the top business schools around the country, taken the test myself multiple times, and really think I understand it inside and out. The second is broader tutoring experience. I also tutor LSAT, MCAT, and other tests, and that helps. Of course, expertise on the GMAT is the most important thing for a GMAT tutor, but experience in other areas can help too. I'll give you an example. The critical reasoning section, which is about a third of the verbal section on the GMAT, is very similar to, and in fact was adapted from, LSAT questions, LSAT critical reasoning questions. So I've learned techniques on the LSAT that can then be applied with appropriate modification to GMAT questions. That kind of breadth of experience can be very valuable. The third reason that you might think about working with me is customization. I used to work for the big test prep companies. Now I'm on my own. And the biggest reason is that when you're with a test prep company, although you may be able to modify some things for individual students, you're still locked into one set of materials, one set of techniques. You got to do things their way. Well, I like to put together a package not just of what hours we meet or how much time we spend on particular things, but also how do we attack certain problems that's designed to work best for you. And over time, as we work together, I can present things in different ways, and I'm not going to try to apply a one-size-fits-all solution. So that's the GMAT. If you'd like more information about the test, about preparing for it, or about me, then please check out my website, dougcouchman.com. And if after looking through that you have more questions, including about how we might design a tutoring package for you, please get in touch with me by email or phone. Thank you again for stopping by, and good luck on the test.